We're starting out in 1 Samuel this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 13. I love it when all the messages line up. It really helps you know that you're doing what the Lord wants you to do. We'll be in 1 Samuel chapter 13 and verse 1. So Saul has been king now for just a little bit. And first, before I point out Saul's sins, I want everybody to realize that Saul's whole life, he wasn't horrible. I know that a lot of times we point out Saul's sin because that's what he was at the end. But he was a child of God, and God did appoint him to be king. And just want everybody to remember that before we bash Saul. In verse 1, Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years in Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in Mount Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. And the rest of the people he sent every man to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, Let the Hebrews hear. And all Israel heard that Saul had smitten a garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel also was had an abomination with the Philistines, and that the people were called together after Saul to Gilgal. And when the Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and the people as the sand which is on the sea shore in multitude. And they came up and pitched in Michmash, eastward from Bethaven. And the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed. Then the people did hide themselves in caves, and in thickets, and in rocks, and in high places, and in pits. So the Lord wrought a great victory for Israel. He let them defeat a garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines got pretty upset. So, as we see here, Saul only has 3,000 men total, and the Philistines have an innumerable amount of people. And in battle, that's considered hopeless. But the Lord works miracles through Israel a lot. But here we see that all the people are starting to get scared. They're hiding. They're deserting Saul. And I mean, who would blame them? You know, the odds at D-Day were so much better than what we would call this, and people were so scared to death. And the people were hiding and deserting. And so we'll read on and see what Saul did. And some of the Hebrews went over Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel had came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Samuel and Saul had planned on meeting here, apparently, and Samuel wasn't here. So Saul's in a real pickle. Israel, I know, was always supposed to offer sacrifice and seek the Lord's will before going into battle. And here Samuel hasn't showed up. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, What hast thou done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest days appointed, that the Mash. Therefore said I, The Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. I forced myself therefore, and offered a burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom, the Lord has sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. So, in this entire chapter we've read so far, never once have we seen Saul pray, seek the Lord's will, but to go ahead and try to fix the problem himself. And that's what we do a lot. We're like Jacob and Saul, and we try to fix the problem without consulting God, without asking God's help, or even just simply obeying what the Bible says. And because of this, the kingdom was taken away from Saul's family. So our sin not only affected ourselves, but Saul affected his son, his son's sons. Jonathan would have been the next king, but he can't be now, and his sons won't be, and they're removed from the throne. Now in verse 15, And Samuel arose and gat him up from Gilgal unto Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people that were present with him, about 600 men. And Saul and Jonathan his son and the people that were present with them abode in Gibeah of Benjamin. But the Philistines encamped in Michmash. And the spoilers came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned unto the way that leadeth to Ophrah, unto the land of Shaul. And another company turned the way to Bethhoron. And another company turned to the way of the border that looked to the valley of Zeboim, toward the wilderness. Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share, and his coulter, and his axe, and his mattock. For they had yet they had a file for the mattocks, and for the coulters, and for the forks, and for the axes, and to sharpen the goads. So it came to pass in the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan, but with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found. So we see that Saul had been sinning for a while. He'd already become too friendly with Israel's friends. They were depending on the Philistines for their weapons and for their sharpening. So now when the Philistines wanted to take them over, all they had to do was quit giving them their weapons, and Israel would be lost. Sword sharpening and making is a very distinct trade. I doubt any of us here know how to do it. I don't know how to do it, but it's something you have to practice and know how to do. And the Philistines did, and the Israelites didn't, so they had gotten out of practice. And that's a serious problem. Try to figure out where I'm at now. Let's skip over to chapter 14 and verse 16. The Lord still will continue his will, even if we mess up and sin. We're not going to change his will. And he allowed Israel to defeat the Philistines, but Saul caused himself a mess of problems and heartaches in the process. And the watching of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin, verse 16, looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, number now, and see who's gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. And Saul said to Abiah, bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was at the time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priest, that the noise that was the Philistines went on, priest, withdraw thine hand. And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves. And they came to the battle, and behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up with them into the camp from about the country round about, even they also turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, all the men of Israel which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim, when they had heard that the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Bethaven. And again, through verse 16 and 23, we don't see Saul praying. We don't see him turning to God. We see him looking at objects, the Ark of the Covenant, and to people like the priest, not to God. And the battle didn't go well until we see that the Lord worked in it. That's the only way anything in our life works right, is when we let God do it. Yes. Now I have to turn to Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6. We'll look at an example of how much better it works when we just obey and have faith and do what the Lord wants us to do and let him fix it. Judges chapter 6 and verse 1. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them the dens which are in the mountains, and caves, and strongholds. And so it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites and the children of the east, even they came up against them. And they camped against them, and destroyed the increase of the earth, till thou come unto Gaza, and left no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor ass. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, which said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt, and brought you forth out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drave them out before you, and gave you their land. I love how this uses the same example as the lesson that Brother Jason brought, how it just works together so perfectly. In verse 10, and I said unto you, I am the Lord your God. Fear not the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell, but ye have not obeyed my voice. So far, Israel's in real big trouble. They've been taken over by at least 3 different nations, and their armies and their people are so innumerable. The Bible doesn't even give us a number. And they have innumerable cattle, or camels, and every time Israel just tries to grow some food, they take it, and it's pretty bad. I mean, most countries don't survive this. And we'll go to verse 11. And there came an angel of the Lord, and sat under an oak which was in Ophrah, that pertained to Joash the Abiezrite, and his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And we see here Gideon has to hide just to get wheat, make some bread or whatever they needed to eat. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. I think it's interesting that he calls Gideon a mighty man of valor. Here he is hiding, not doing anything to fix the situation, just trying to eat and stay alive. And the Lord calls him a mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles, which our fathers told us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us, and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. And the Lord looked upon him, and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I sent thee? And again, the Lord refers to his might. The only might I can see in this must be Gideon's faith, because he instantly knows it's God when he's talking to him, which means that Gideon must have kept a prayer life with the Lord. If he knew when the Lord was speaking to him, he must have met him before. Verse 16, and the Lord said unto him, Surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man. And he said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, then show me a sign that thou talkest with me. Here in verse 17, he's seeking the Lord's will. Never once did we see Saul even look to the Bible or to pray or anything to know what the Lord wanted him to do. Verse 18, Depart not hence, I pray thee, until I come unto thee, and bring forth my present, and set it before thee. And he said, I will tarry until thou come again. And Gideon went in and made ready a kid, and unleavened cakes of an ephah of flour, and the flesh he put in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot, and brought it out unto him under the oak, and presented it. Now, this might not seem like a real glorious feast to give the Lord, but the food's pretty hard right now. The Midianites are taking everything, and he's just trying to hide to get enough food for himself and his family. And yet he's serving the Lord with it, and he gives it all to him. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Take the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and lay them upon this rock, and pour out the broth. And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand, and touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And there rose up fire out of the rock, and consumed the flesh and the unleavened cakes. Then the angel of the Lord departed out of his sight. And when Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord, Gideon said, Alas, O Lord God, for because I have seen an angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord said unto him, Peace be unto thee, fear not, thou shalt not die. Then Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord, and called it Jehovah Shalom. Unto this day it is yet in the Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now if you'll skip ahead to verse 33. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east were gathered together, and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and Abiezer was gathered after him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also was gathered after him. And he sent messengers unto Asher, and unto Zebulun, and unto Naphtali, and they came up to meet them. And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by mine hand, as thou said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the floor. And if the dew be on the fleece only, and it be dry upon all the earth beside, then I shall know that thou wilt save Israel by mine hand, as thou hast said. So again, here he's testing the Lord to see his will, which is very important. He's going to battle, and He wants to be completely sure that he's doing what the Lord wants. And again, we never saw Saul do that, never saw Saul pray, and we know how it turned out. In verse 38, and it was so, for he rose up early on the morrow, and thrust the fleece together, and wringed the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. And Gideon said to the Lord, let not thine anger be hot against me, and I will speak but this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground. Let there be dew. And God did so that night. For I've heard somebody say before that that was a lack of faith, that Gideon should have just been fine with one son, but I completely disagree. I think it's good for a child of God to ask the Lord earnestly for his will and to be completely sure. And right now, as a church, as we're looking for a pastor, we need to be sure in everything that we do and pray multiple times and be sure of whatever decision we ever come to. Now we'll start in chapter 7. Then Jerubbaal, who was Gideon, and all the people that were with him, rose up early and pitched beside the well of Herod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand hath saved me. From what I know about battle, having too many men is not an issue, especially in hand-to-hand combat. But here the Lord tells him he needs less. And this is what I think takes a lot of faith here, is to tell an incredibly small army against three nations that a bunch of you need to go home. We have too many. And Gideon did it. We'll look in verse 3. Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, and the same shall go with thee. And of whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. I want you to notice here in the kind of middle of the verse, it says, and I will try them for thee. Here Gideon's just letting the Lord do what the Lord needs to do. We don't need to get in the way and try to figure things out for him. He already knows. It's already his plan. We need to let him work it. Now we'll continue in verse 5. So he brought down the people unto the water, and the Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself, likewise every one that boweth down upon his knees to drink. And the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men. That's not a whole lot. 300 men against three nations. That'd be every man has to put about 100 of a nation in there. It doesn't seem to work for man. Math would say it's impossible. Anyone would say it's impossible. But that's what the Lord tells Gideon to do. And Gideon obeys. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand, and let all the other people go every man into his place. So the people took victuals in their hand and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man into his tent, and retained those 300 men, and the host of Midian was beneath them in the valley. And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, arise, get thee down unto the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. Again, here we see the Lord talking to Gideon. They kept constant communication between each other. They had a good relationship. Gideon and the Lord communicated, and Gideon knew the Lord's will. And the Lord talked to Gideon. We don't see that in Saul. Saul had lost his close relationship with the Lord, and he wasn't communicating with him. He was worried about his numbers. Here, Gideon takes no thought to only taking 300 men, whereas we see Saul getting pretty nervous when the people start deserting him. It's verse 11. And thou shalt hear what they say, and afterward shall thine hands be strengthened to go down unto the host. Then went he down with Purah his servant unto the outside of the armed men that were in the host. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay like grasshopper, as the sand of the seaside for multitude. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow, and said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it that it fell, and overturned it that the tent lay along. And his fellow answered and said, this is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. I want you to notice that last part of the verse, and it said, hath God delivered Midian and all the host. Even though Gideon is the one leading them and is the one who the Lord's talking to through it, even his men realize it's God that's doing it. And that's how it needs to be. In verse 15. And it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned into the host of Israel, and said, Arise, for the Lord hath delivered you into your hand the host of Midian. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, and with empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, Look on me, and do likewise, and behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be that as I do, so shall you do. If I'm going into battle, I want every weapon I can carry. I mean, back then, I'd be like, give me a sword, give me my armor, give me a bow. I want a horse. I want something fast. If this goes wrong, I want to be able to get away. And he says, basically, you're going to take a pitcher and a flashlight and a trumpet, and you're going to defeat 3 nations, at least, with 300 men. And I probably would have thought Gideon was crazy. We have hospitals meant for people like that have crazy ideas, and they don't get to go out. But Gideon did as the Lord said. Verse 18. When I blow the trumpet, I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets also on every side of all the camp. And said the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came into the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. And again, they don't follow any common battle strategy. Usually, you're going to sneak up right up onto them before you start. And instead, they turn on bright lights and they shout and make lots of noise, like, hey, we're right here, right in front of them. And they still obey. I mean, Saul was following what you consider a common battle strategy. He wanted as many men, he wanted to fight in an open place, and Gideon doesn't care. He just wants to do what the Lord says. And we'll look in verse 20. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands, to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Even their battle cry tells us it's the Lord doing it, not just Gideon, and not just the men. I lost my place. Verse 21. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. And the host fled to Beth Shittah in Zareth, and to the border of Abel Meholah unto Tabbath. And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, and out of Asher, and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all Mount Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites, and take before them the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together, and took the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. And they took 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb. And they slew Oreb upon the rock, Oreb, and Zeb they slew at the winepress of Zeb, and pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side of Jordan. So the battle went great. The Lord had all the nations fight themselves to death. The Israelites didn't even have to fight it until they were all fleeing. If you'll turn to chapter 8, verse 22 in Judges, we'll see verse 22. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you, the Lord shall rule over you. Here Gideon follows the Lord's will, even though it meant he gives up being king. He gives up his son being king and his son's sons being king. That would be a pretty huge promotion. He went from a poor family to being king, and he turned it down because he knew it wasn't the Lord's will. Now we'll look at another example of how the Lord works for us when we just obey and listen. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 1. Um, First, when we have problems and we try to fix them ourselves, we probably don't see it as sin. It's a problem. I should take care of it. It's my problem. I should try to fix it. But a lot of times what we don't realize is when we're trying to solve the problem without God, we're taking the pride of saying that we can do it without God. And that's the sin that we're doing, is that we're having the pride to say that we can do something without God, whereas God's the only one that can do it. Before we start reading, I'll give you a quick history. Um, the Babylonian Empire has taken over Israel, a mess they get in a whole lot. When they sin, the Lord allows them to be taken over. And they take all of the really smart and elite Jewish men, to Chaldea to learn the way of the Chaldeans. And there they would do what the Chaldeans did. They would learn what they learned, and they wouldn't have their religious freedom. They were supposed to be just as the Chaldeans, which worshiped pagan gods and had lots of practices that the Israelites weren't allowed to follow. In chapter 2 and verse 1, and in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you show me the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. So King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and it's keeping him up all night, and it must have really bothered him, because he's willing to cut all of his wise men into pieces if they don't figure it out for him. Let's see, verse 7. And they answered again and said, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none except that can show thee before the king, except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. Here all his so-called magicians, astrologers, all the smartest guys he's got say, We can't do it. That's impossible. You're crazy. Only our gods can know it. But for some reason, even the people that are supposed to be able to talk to their gods can't ask them. They're nearly admitting defeat for their own gods. Verse 12. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Not just the ones he told to answer. He's decided anyone in Babylon considered a wise man is going to get killed. He's going to kill them all. And that would include the Jews, because these were all the smart and elite men, except that they were men of science and learning. So all the Jews that they brought into Chaldea would be killed at this point. And they probably hadn't even heard about the king's dream yet. I mean, all of a sudden, some guy comes knocking at your door. It's time for you to be executed. In verse 13, and the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, Why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. I kind of like how Daniel says, Why is it so hasty? He's not surprised that the king's ordering his death. They've already been taken over, and the Jews are probably just a project. See if we can make them like us. But Daniel wants to know why it's so urgent. And we also see that he answered with wisdom and with counsel. I believe he means the Lord's counsel, because in Proverbs it says that God is the only one that can give us wisdom. So we know that Daniel had a relationship with the Lord and that he knew him. Now, let's see, I lost it again. Verse 16. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. So right here, Daniel didn't say that maybe he would or think he would. Daniel had the faith that God would give him the answer. Verse 17. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning the secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Instantly, Daniel goes to his friends and asks their prayers that they would all start praying. Again, we never saw Saul do this. He never asked people to pray. He never prayed. He didn't consult the Bible, and he didn't have any faith. He was scared to death. And I'm not saying that being scared doesn't mean you have faith, but Saul wasn't looking to the Lord for the battle. He was looking for his number of men. He was looking for the rituals of the sacrifice to do what they needed to have done. Verse 19. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee, for thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Instantly Daniel praises the Lord immensely. We didn't see that. He didn't even ask for his will. In verse 24, therefore Daniel went in unto the Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Here we see Daniel has mercy. Personally, if I was taken over by the Babylonians, I'd have been like, yeah, your guys couldn't do it, but I did, so you can go ahead and kill them all, but let me and the Jews live. But he didn't. He asked for the mercy of the king. Verse 25. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. And the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days thy dream, and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes it shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of the heart. Instantly, Daniel seizes the opportunity to witness to the king, who we already know is prone to anger, incredibly violent, and has a lot of power. He can order anyone dead he wants. And Daniel instantly proves the king's gods that are pagan to be wrong, and shows that it was his God, and he didn't take any of the credit for it. Right here, Daniel could have used the opportunity. He could have been like, I figured it out. I used this technique. I want to be king, or I want to be next king. Or he could have promoted himself almost any way he wanted to. And instead, he said, It wasn't me, it was my God. Um, I won't be going into the interpretation of the dream. It's not what this lesson's about. But if you turn to verse 46 of chapter 2 in Daniel, verse 46. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. Here we see Nebuchadnezzar still doesn't really fully realize what happened. All through this book, Nebuchadnezzar is going to keep causing problems right up until the end. But he says, Of truth it is that your God is a God of gods, a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. He's not saying that Daniel's God's the only God. He's just saying that, wow, Daniel, your God's pretty good. He's like ours. He thinks there's lots of gods, there's lots of kings, there's lots of lords. In verse 48, Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he said, And he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat at the gate of the king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that was the Chaldean name for the three men that Daniel asked the Lord to pray, or asked them to pray. They were all given different, and most of them ungodly names having to do with idols. You don't have to turn there. I'm just going to do it, so I misquote it, but most of us have memorized this, and Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. I'll just read it real quick. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. People, whenever you're going through hard times, people say that a lot. But one thing it never says in that verse, and I've looked for it, is it never says we won't have problems. It never says there are not going to be huge issues in our life. It just says that they're going to work together for the good of God's people, as we've seen in all these problems. Even when Saul sinned and messed things up for himself, God still worked what he was going to work. And lastly, I know this may have seemed like it was just for the saved, but it applies just as much to anyone that's lost as saved. And I'll show you how in Romans chapter 3. Romans chapter 3 and verse 10. Romans chapter 3 and verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth, there is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way, they are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Their throat is an open sepulchre, with their tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction, misery are in their ways. And the way of peace have they not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. So right here we see basically a doomed problem, just like the Israelites faced and like Gideon faced every time of the problems that we looked. There's no way out. We can't do it. But the Lord is the only way that can save it. So we'll continue verse 21. But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God which is by faith of Christ Jesus unto all and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God has set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God, to declare, say, at this time his righteousness, that you might be just and the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. Where is boasting then is excluded. By what law of works? Nay, by the law of faith. Right here, it just assures again that after the Lord saves you, it has nothing to do with you whatsoever, and we can't boast. Right after I was saved, I struggled with it a lot because I'm prone to mess up. And I thought, what if when the Lord was saving me, I did something wrong? Or what if I messed up? What if I'm not really saved because I didn't do something right? But this verse assures us not only that boasting is wrong, but that we had nothing to do with it. It's completely God. Verse 28. Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also, seeing it is one God which shall justify the circumcision by faith and uncircumcision through faith. So right here it says that not only is this applied to Jews, but to everyone. That's all I have this morning. Brother Derek, would you come and lead us in a song of invitation?
All stand and grab a hymn book.